Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
We have no updates right now because
Mm-mm.
we just finished recording and then, chatted for 20 minutes in between like you do, because apparently we didn't get all of our talkies out before earlier.
You gotta, sometimes you think of stuff and you're like, I can't say this because the person's gonna have to edit it out. And so then your brain just becomes a task list of all the things you have to tell them when you're done recording. So,
Yes, yes. Speaking of, that made me think of something that I meant to tell you, but I mean, it's podcast-ish worthy, I guess. So I'll just go ahead and tell you now. But the Office Ladies pod, probably a few months ago now, Jenna was talking about how when she like focuses on writing that, she like turns off her distractions and everything, but that she keeps a notepad where she like writes down the things that she thinks
Mhm.
of like while she was working. And I'm like, that's so smart because it's true. Like working from home, you're like, oh, like that laundry finished an hour ago. Like, let me just go throw it in the dryer really quick. And then you do that. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, and now I see this, let me put the dishes in the dishwasher and let me do this, whatever. Like I have that problem a lot. And I'm like, that's so smart. And so, just
I
throwing that
know
out
that
there for you
she was
guys.
really big on like time blocks. So she'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
from this time, like 5 minutes in the morning, I'm going to
Yes.
do like journaling or whatever with no distractions. And then this
Yep.
time I'm going to do this, like very like rigid on like, okay, like, no, you can't be like bouncing around. Like you got to do this in this time.
Which I mean, like research has shown that like multitasking is not a thing. Like you're just half-assing two things, which I'm super guilty of. But yeah,
I mean,
so
that's just my life is half-assing everything. I mean, let's
that's
be
what I
honest.
intend to do actually.
It's my life.
Yeah, so I thought that was I haven't I wouldn't say I've actually used it since then, but I meant to and then
I
I kind
think
of
that's
forgot about
hard
it.
now that you still have a very young child at home while
Just
you're
right on my
working because
list,
you can't be
change
like
poopy diaper.
Millie's
Do that
crying.
later.
Get back to that. Okay. Now let's no distraction. Millie, no distraction. So,
Yeah, mostly for like during her nap periods when I'm working. Like I feel like because I mean, once I put her down for a nap, then I'm like, well, let me clean up this, kitchen and let the dogs out, and then do those little tasks before I like sit down to work, and then other things. So I need to like work on that for nap time of like using that system to not
mhm.
get distracted with the other household things that come up, or like when
Yeah.
I'm working in the evenings after she's gone to bed because work never ends because I'm working from home with a child. But anyway, yeah, so that was our rant that we didn't intend to go on. But
We
like I said, we
always
don't
find something. We always find something to give you guys a little banter. And if you hate it, well, I
we
do apologize, I guess. I
skip.
don't really care.
There are other podcasts out there for you that don't banter at all. So please, that was another thing. Sometimes I like randomly look at other podcast reviews to see like, because I mean, we don't get a ton. So I'm like, let me see what people say about like other podcasts, and a lot of them for like this type of podcast complain about the banter. And I'm like, but there are true crime podcasts out there that are scripted,
Hmm.
straight scripted, that don't have any banter, that are just like professionals telling a story. And I'm like, you can go listen to them. Like, just because, like, I get if you don't like the banter, there are podcasts out there that don't do
Hmm.
that. So I don't get why people leave negative reviews for like something that's a personal preference. Like, I understand maybe if it's like, oh, you always get the story wrong, or you are like super disrespectful to the victims, or, whatever, like general complaints, which that's another thing
Hmm.
too. If you make a 1-star review based on one episode, like, I don't understand why y'all do that. But anyway, I just don't get the,
Maybe
leaving.
Apple one day can make it where you can review like each episode. So if it like
That'd be
is just
smart.
like a terrible episode,
Yeah.
1 star it, say why, not your whole podcast of 300 plus episodes is a 1 star.
You should pitch that to Apple Podcasts,
I
Courtney.
will. I'm gonna call him
Okay.
up.
All right.
Um, I don't know. I was gonna say Steve Jobs, but it's not him anymore. I don't know who the CEO of Apple is anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
Um,
I'll have to look that up.
okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get into this case today. So we did use a documentary called Monsters Inside the 24 Faces of Billy Milligan and an Esquire and Oxygen.com article. So in October 1977, a series of rapes occurred on the Ohio State campus in Columbus, Ohio, within 12 days. The rapist was found quickly, but he would make history with his insanity defense. So, as we just mentioned, these rapes did occur in October of 1977. So, the first victim was parked like in one of the university parking lots and was approached by an individual. And another victim was a nurse who was leaving her shift and walking to her car, and she was attacked in the parking lot. And they both occurred like by the medical building that was on campus. And the third happened by a dorm on campus. So, it was a little further out, but it's always like near like them walking to their cars, parking lots, kind of like that. And there was a fourth victim who was actually working in downtown Columbus, and it also occurred in a parking lot. So it was a little further off, but still relatively close to the campus. So some sources will say like only 3 women were raped, but there does appear to be this fourth. But the fourth was just off campus, but like still near it. So I don't know if that's why people are like, well, it's 3 Ohio State students or whatever. So they're kind of like not including that fourth. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But in each case, he did try to get money from the victims and he used a gun in the attacks as well. Unfortunately, like there's not much more information on the victims themselves. We really tried to research and find it, even just their names, but there's no success. Like the documentary just called them the victims, no news articles. It could possibly be like they no longer want to be associated with the case. Like they may have been like, please don't say my name, because as you'll see, this case turns into just like a shit show. So they might just be like, please leave me out of this. I don't want this to follow me.
Which I feel like is probably the case with like none of them being mentioned and like a whole documentary being done and everything. Like, I feel like usually with those documentaries, they do try to speak to the victims. So I feel like the fact that they didn't speak to them, that they don't even have their names or any information, I would think would point to the fact that they didn't want to be identified as having to do with this.
Yeah. And even like news sources, like none of them mention names. Like, we do know that one victim was engaged to be married before the rapes, and that did fall apart after. So we do know that detail, but we don't know which victim. And then again, that is the extent we know about any of the victims. We do try to really focus on the victims. Unfortunately, this case just is not allowing that. So the Ohio State campus was anxious and worried. So women began like getting walked to their classes because it was like, these are people just walking around and now like we're getting attacked just walking on campus. And based on the MO and the sketch, they did believe it was the same person like attacking the women. Like they didn't think it was just like multiple one-offs. They think it's like one person. And he did leave fingerprints inside of one of the cars. So they were able to run the prints and they got a match, and Billy Milligan popped up. He did have a record with Columbus Police Department. He'd done some time in the Ohio system and the juvenile system. So they did have previous mugshots, and the victims confirmed it was him. So he kind of just like left his fingerprint and like led the police straight to him. So in October 26th, they got a search warrant for his residence, and he said something like, look out for the bomb. And he said it was in the box next to the dresser. So, of course, like the bomb squad, the fire department, everyone's coming out because they're like, oh, there's a bomb in this guy's apartment who we're trying to search. But it was a fake bomb. So clearly just kind of off to an odd start. He's just kind of being weird. However, he did not resist arrest. So the campus did feel a little bit of relief, but with how quickly like he was arrested, they were just kind of suspicious. Like, what if the police is the wrong person? And like, what if like this seems all too quickly to be wrapped up? So Billy's brother, Jim Morrison, yes, he has the same name as the Door singer, and his sister, Kathy Preston, were very shocked, along with a few like childhood friends of Billy's. They just couldn't really imagine Billy like being capable of this. So the arraignment was very quickly after the arrest, and Kathy said his face looked so odd and messed up, like he just looked clueless and like he had no idea where he was, like just kind of very, very off. So Billy was indicted by a grand jury on 4 counts of rape, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 3 counts of aggravated robbery. So Billy was given public defenders, Judy Stevenson and Gary Schwerick. So Judy and Gary were known like as great lawyers. They were like very well respected. So Gary is advising Billy, like, don't answer any questions, like don't like talk to the police without us present. But they had a feeling like something more was going on. Like he would draw a lot in jail, but like some of his drawings were like very, very advanced, and others looked like a child did it. And so psychologists would come to see him, and a lot of the results were like odd and confusing. So like one day his IQ result would be like borderline intellectual disability, like very, very low. And the next day it would be like genius levels, that he's like the smartest man in the world, basically.
Just like super odd.
Yeah. So they're all just kind of like, what's happening here? So Judy and Gary did spend a lot of time with Billy, and they said he would just kind of have like different personalities. Like he held himself differently. He would speak in different accents. His personality would change like in a very dramatic way. Like it was not subtle. So like when he switched, like his eyes would like roll backwards and they would like flutter. Like he would like blink a lot, and then it would just be like a different person, like in front of them. So Billy's mom said, like, I'm not surprised. She's like, I've always said there's two Billies and one Billy does bad things, which I feel like is something parents say a lot, though. Like whenever your kid starts acting up and you're like, what'd you do with my kid? Where's
exactly.
my kid? Like,
yeah.
like this isn't how I raised you. Like you're doing the, So one of the psychologists, Dorothy Turner, believed it could be possible that he had multiple personality disorder. It is now known as dissociative identity disorder. We'll probably refer to it a lot as multiple personality disorder because that's what it was at the time, but do know like it's not called that anymore.
Yeah.
So it just kind of means there can be multiple personalities that take on their own entity, and they may not know about the existence of the other personalities. And they'll usually have no like recollection of the things they've done in the past that like a different identity did. Very brief, because our Patreon episode that comes out in 2 days will be a full deep dive on dissociative identity disorder. So if you want to know a lot more, come join Patreon. I know, a plug right in the middle of the episode. You guys are so mad. I know. Patreon.com/caffeinated just so you know.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah. So the prosecutor was very skeptical when Gary mentioned Billy could have multiple personalities. Because, I mean, of course you are. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you're like, of course your defendant has multiple personalities. Okay, yeah.
Oh, okay. He didn't do it. The other ones did. Okay.
Yeah. I think especially in this case, like when your defense attorney is like, oh, yeah, it wasn't Billy. It was so-and-so. You're like,
yeah.
Okay. So Billy did ask to get an examination to see if he could apply for not guilty by reason of insanity. So in 1978, he met with Dr. George Harding. He was pretty skeptical, but believed there could be evidence of like multiple personality, dissociative identity disorder. But Dr. Harding also tried to get opinions from like many different psychologists and psychiatrists. He's like, I don't want to be biased. Like, can you come and like see like what you think? And they're worried he's just using this as an excuse to get out of the cases. He's just saying different accents and acting like different people to like play being insane to get out of these charges. And in 1976, a movie called Sybil was released. And it was about a girl who had multiple personality disorder. And it was based off of a real person. And it was written by the author with the assistance of Sybil and her doctor. And Judy even recommended prosecutors to watch it to like get a better understanding of what the disorder was, because it is very rare. And Dr. George Harding did talk to Sybil's doctor to try and get a better understanding of this disorder. And I do think it's important because this movie did come out in 1976, and then these rapes are happening in 1977.
That's very interesting.
I'm not trying to put too much out there, but it is very odd that multiple personality disorder got this huge movie, book, press, all that. And then this happens just
for something that's not like super common. It's not like this is like bipolar disorder that has like pretty high rates,
schizophrenia, like stuff like that, where people like know of it. Yeah. So on March 12th, 1978, prosecutors came to sit with Billy for a while so they could like see the personality shift. And up until this meeting, like they thought it was a joke or a charade. But they said in this meeting, they were like, maybe this could really be real. Like it kind of convinced them. And they were like, if this is a fake, it's a very, very good fake. Like he's doing a very good job. Like give this man an Oscar. But they were like, we do kind of believe it might be real. So Billy was sent to Harding Hospital to be restored to competency. And this is kind of odd because usually if people are trying to be restored to competency, they were sent to Lima State Hospital for the criminally insane. But they believed Harding would be safer for Billy. We'll get into it more, but like Lima State Hospital is like a hellhole. It's like a horrible place. It is not, should not even be called a hospital, basically.
Yeah.
So they did send him to Harding Hospital, which was like a lot of people like had issues with because they're like, why is this rapist getting special treatment? Like, why is he being sent to this like nice hospital? What's going on? And all his drawings were different based on what personality he was like at the moment. So they're trying to figure out like all of the personalities, like how many different identities are in Billy, because some were male, some were female, some were younger and older. But the person who was in charge the most was Arthur. And he was the one who dealt with any situation that like felt unsafe. And Arthur had a British accent and was unemotional. And he like, quote, controlled the other personalities. So he's like, I'll let you speak to the other ones like when I say so, I guess. And it took Arthur a while to let them meet Reagan, spelled Ragen, like rage in, who was like the angry and violent personality. He spoke in a Yugoslavian accent. There was also Tommy, who was an escape artist. And he actually was able to get out of the unit he was in. Like he was like one night just escaped. And he was like, I didn't want to escape. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I just wanted to see if I could get out of this room, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he could get out of like a straitjacket, a locked room, anything. And Danny, there was Danny, he was 14, not a lot about him. Christine was like a frightened little girl and would hide in the corner and not look at you. David was 9 years old and he remembered a lot of abuse from like Billy's childhood that we'll get into in a little bit. So Dr. Harding's like, yeah, I think we got at least 10 personalities here. Like we got a lot going on. But he thought Billy's like reality was very distorted and like had amnesia. Like Billy's clearly whatever's happening, he's not remembering a lot. Like his reality is not our reality. Like he's somewhere else.
Yeah.
And Jim and Kathy did say they'd noticed he would talk in different accents a lot. Like he'd randomly talk in a British accent and use British slang. And everyone thought he was just being funny. Like they thought it was him trying to be a comedian, but he would like act serious. Like he'd be like, I need to go get some like petrol. Like when in America, like we call that gas. Like we don't call it those kind of things. But people are like, oh, he's just like trying to be funny because that's what kids do. So Billy was 14 when he first visited a psychiatric hospital and they wanted to do some tests. And at this time, the doctor did say he had like states of amnesia. It was kind of like he just couldn't remember stuff. One of the alters, Tommy, had once told doctors at Harding Hospital that Billy was asleep and had been for 5 years. One doctor says, you know, multiple personality isn't common, but it's not rare. Basically, kind of like this, like, you don't see it a lot, but it like does happen kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're saying they keep Billy asleep because when he wakes up, he wants to kill himself. So they believe like these identities, personalities could be like a defense mechanism or defense strategy. Like whenever he has to come to his reality of like what's happening, he gets too overwhelmed, he tries to kill himself. So it's like a defense mechanism to come in and be like, protect him, I guess. So, and it's kind of like every time like Billy's wanting to kill himself, he's like breaking himself into multiple identities to like protect himself, basically. But his mom was kind of saying it like, no, he's like always been this way. Like since he was a little kid, he's always just kind of been like this, I guess. So one of the doctors was able to talk to Billy again, and he said he was scared and he didn't know where he was, what was happening. Like when Billy comes back, he's like, why am I here? What are you talking about? Like none of this happened. He didn't even remember getting to the hospital, and he would just express like overwhelming fear. And people who do have like a terrible trauma, like can disassociate and create an alternate reality to protect themselves. And he did have child abuse that actually bordered like torture, basically, like very, very bad childhood. So they did interview the family to try to understand his symptomology a little bit more.
So Dorothy Sands was Billy's mother, and she grew up in Ohio. She was actually abandoned by her father at the age of 8 after her mother died, and she was raised by very strict Catholic grandparents. So already have a lot of trauma just right off the bat for her.
Not a great start.
No. So she married her high school sweetheart, Dick Jonas, at age 18. Dick was an alcoholic and he was strapped for money, and Dorothy had a desire to sing, so she left Dick and joined her sister Jo in Miami to try to sing like in the nightclub scene there. So that's when she met Johnny Morrison. So he was already well established as a comedian and a musician, and they had an affair, and she got pregnant and gave birth to Jim in 1953. Then she had Billy on Valentine's Day in 1955. So when he was a month old, he actually stopped breathing. He had a growth in his throat, and the nurse was like, well, he's gone. There's nothing we can do. But Dorothy started screaming at her to help him, and they were able to revive him, and he did survive, which like,
imagine if she did not just like yell at that nurse. Like the nurse was just like, no, your baby's dead.
Yeah. Like what? Like you shouldn't have to persuade a nurse to save your child. That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. The 50s, man. The 50s.
So then in December of 1956, Kathy was born. So Johnny had some trouble with depression. He had a bad gambling habit. And he did dabble in drugs. And he would get really jealous of Dorothy, like talking to anyone. And Jim said he remembers at a young age seeing Johnny hit Dorothy. So eventually Dorothy decided that Johnny needed to leave because he was a danger to the children, and they never saw their father again. And shortly after she asked him to leave, trigger warning for suicide. He did die by suicide at the hotel he was staying at. He actually asphyxiated himself, and he left a suicide note, which basically blamed Dorothy, saying that she made him crazy. And Dorothy didn't tell the children until they were older that he had died by suicide. She told them that he died of a cerebral hemorrhage due to poor health, which I get wanting to protect your children from that knowledge. And so horrific that he like blamed her.
Yeah, he's like blaming her, like leaving the kids. So I understand her being like, I am not telling these kids because I don't want them to blame me.
Yeah,
you know, especially in those like teenage, like preteen, teenage years when you just hate everybody, especially your parents. And you're like, yeah, I'm gonna blame my mom and kind of like glorize my dad who's not here. So like I get why she did that.
For sure. So Dorothy moved back to Amanda, Ohio, to the farm where she grew up. Billy was less social than Kathy and Jim. Like he wouldn't really participate in the group activities with the other kids like kickball or anything. He did have a really great sense of humor and was really close to Kathy, so they would play together a lot. And Dorothy reunited with Dick Jonas, and he took her back along with her 3 kids. So they did live in Circleville, and she got remarried to him right away. So Dick was a truck driver, still drinking a lot, and the marriage did go south pretty quickly. So she got a job at a local factory and was trying to sing again, and that's when she met another man named Chalmer Milligan. That's hard to say.
So it's a name, Chalmer. I've never heard that name before.
No, Chalmer. I don't know why my mouth cannot make that come out. But he was charming and very nice. I would expect someone named Chalmer to be charming.
Chalmer to be charming.
So Milligan had a daughter named Chala, and he was like really protective over her. And she was actually around Billy's age, like she was just a few months older than him. And so Dorothy and Milligan decided to adopt each other's children to become the Milligan family.
And just so you know, she's referring to Chalmer Milligan, not Billy Milligan when she says Milligan, because Chalmer's hard. I just don't want people to start thinking we're talking about Billy Milligan again. So just so you know.
I struggle with Chalmer, guys. I was trying to avoid that. So Chalmer seemed to care very much for Dorothy and the kids, but he did soon become really controlling. How do we know this was not going to have a happy ending for the Milligans?
Yeah.
So Jim and Kathy remembered a time where they got in a fight because Chalmer said he saw Dorothy talking to a black man at work. So he was soon on top of her and banging her head into the tile in front of the children. It did turn from slapping to punching to dragging her around by her hair and just like kept escalating. Chalmer would also go to the bar every night and then come home and be violent towards his family. He would drag the kids out of bed and beat them for any reason he could come up with. The police did come one time after Chalmer had beaten Dorothy, and she was bloody and missing hair, like clearly a very severe beating. So Billy yelled at the officer, like, look what he did to my mother, and asked the officer to take him away so he wouldn't do it again. And the officer said, as you do in this time, well, if she was a better wife, she wouldn't get knocked around now, would she? That's what the officer said to this child whose mother had just been severely beaten by her husband.
To a child. Like, I don't even think he was like, he's probably like 10 around this time. And that's what this officer is saying to him, who just saw his mother get like beaten.
So Chalmer would beat Jim and Billy in the garage, and he would use a phone book or like something thick and have them put it up against their chest so it wouldn't leave any marks. So he is like very calculating with his torture and abuse. He would threaten to beat Dorothy and their sisters if they said anything. Very abusive and targeted Billy a lot. And Chalmer claimed that he wouldn't obey, that he was a hassle, that he wouldn't follow directions, like really focusing in on Billy specifically. And Kathy also said it seemed like he hated Billy the most and he would like go out of his way to make his life miserable. And Billy was more sensitive and he took it a lot harder than the others did too. So Chalmer's father owned an 88-acre farm and he would take the kids there to punish and discipline them, i.e. abuse and torture. So he would take the children to the barn a lot, and a lot of Billy's abuse happened there. And Billy also said that Chalmer had raped him, and he said that Chalmer had forced him to dig a grave and then lie in it and then urinate on his face.
And there was like a whole like system too, that he like made him like hold a pipe and all this, like a very calculated, disgusting system on how he like raped and tortured him. Like, it's disgusting.
Yeah. So Billy did attempt suicide many times throughout his life because of this abuse that he endured. But of course, Chalmer denies all of these allegations, as an abuser does. Kathy also recalled a time when she and Billy had talked about killing Chalmer. She said Billy was around 14 or 15 years old, and he told Kathy that he was going to stab him in his sleep, but he didn't. And so Kathy asked him the next morning, like, why he didn't, and he said he had no recollection of that conversation. One night, Chalmer had grabbed Billy and was beating him, and Jim grabbed a knife and put it to Chalmer's throat and said to leave, and if he ever came back, he would kill him. And their relationship was mostly over at this point.
Yeah, thankfully it seems like somehow whatever Jim did or said did get through to him, and he just kind of left. And
which is surprising because usually, like, when you are that kind of abuser on that kind of power trip, it's like nothing makes a difference.
Yeah.
But Billy did start dabbling in drugs and some petty crimes, and it slowly started getting worse until 1972 when he was arrested in Circleville for an alleged kidnapping and rape. So him and a few friends had picked up a few girls, and one of the guys had sex with another girl, but he claims like they were just drinking. It wasn't, I don't know. And he said he wouldn't remember doing anything that people like told him he did. He's like, people said I did these things, but I don't remember doing them. One time Billy needed money and he went to a local rest stop and robbed some people. He did take a plea deal for a robbery charge for that. And he went to prison and was there from 1975 to 1977. And Kathy said he was really trying to like turn his life around for a while. But then after he got out, he just slowly started slipping back to his old ways.
But yeah, and I don't know if these if this is like hindsight looking back, but I mean, Kathy would mention moments like, with the whole Chalmer, like killing Chalmer, where she's like, he literally looked like he had no recollection. So I don't know if these like are like actual signs of DID like in his like childhood, because that's a lot of times like when it starts, or are they like, oh, well, he did say this and he didn't remember it. Like, is it exaggerated a bit, and like these like, oh, I don't remember, but like if you're drinking, like you might not remember. We all kind of have amnesia. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it DID or is it like another mental health issue like where he's kind of forgetting these things?
Yeah. Like, is she picking out these instances once they have the DID diagnosis in their brain to try to point towards the fact that it's been there all along? Like, and not
to like confirm it.
Yeah. Like, not that she's doing it maliciously, but like, is she trying to find evidence that supports that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kathy said that she just like had this intuition about Billy. So like she would know when something was wrong with him. And so she said around the 1977 Ohio State rapes, like she started feeling this and thinking that something was wrong. And Billy's memory of the time in October was very fragmented. So doctors at Harding Hospital interviewed Reagan about the few months before the rapes. And he said he would be like on the spot or like the one that was like present in those times. So he's like, I was the like acting member of,
Yeah, I was the criminal.
Yeah. And Reagan said that he did commit robbery, but not sexual misconduct. But then another personality came forward named Adelana. So Adelana was a lesbian, and she claimed responsibility for the rapes. And she said, I don't know why I did it. I was so lonely. I ruined the women's lives. I ruined the boys, meaning the other personalities' lives. So the female is the one claiming that she is the rapist.
Which I had a real big issue with this.
Yeah.
And there are times when I'm like, I do truly believe Billy maybe had DID.
Mhm.
But the fact that you have Reagan who's angry and violent and commits robberies and all this, but your one female who is a lesbian is the rapist, when
Mhm.
it's like, what? Like, why? It just feels, and especially in the 70s, it feels like a cop out where it's like, oh, it's a woman and a lesbian. Of course she's a rapist. Of course she would do this. Of course, whatever. And it's just like, this just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little
Yeah.
bit.
Because it's like,
and
does
like-
Billy just have this like hatred of women? I mean, clearly, serial rapists do. The issues with his mom, I'm sure that led to it. So is he
projecting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or being like, well, women reject me and it's because they're lesbians or whatever. Especially just being a woman and a lesbian, and she, of all these identities, is the one responsible. I just don't buy it. I just do not.
Yeah.
It just rubs me the wrong way. And I'm not saying women can't be rapist. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying like lesbians cannot be rapist. I'm not saying that. It's just the fact that you're like, I have all these personalities and
the
this
one woman
is
the one that did it. Yeah.
It just felt fake to me a little bit. I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah. So now the question is, did Billy know that what he was doing was legally wrong? And they also needed to see if Billy could refrain from this wrongful behavior. So it didn't really seem like when he was arrested and at Harding Hospital that he was capable of going to trial. He would become like fragmented with his different personalities, and you can't really like try someone who's like splitting personalities like that. So they wanted to accomplish fusion in Billy where all the personalities were as one, and they wanted this to happen before he went to trial. So it did seem like he was making some progress. He was growing in his therapy, and they were ready to go to trial with this progress because they thought they had like fused them all. So the insanity defense is a really hard one to achieve in court. A lot of people like try, but only like 2 to 3 actually work every few decades. I feel like we hear about it a lot, but we don't necessarily hear about the fact that it's not usually successful. Like it's very rare for this to actually like play out. So a lot of people were really skeptical that he was just like trying to fool the criminal justice system, which is what most people think of when the insanity defense comes up. So the defense did go to the judge and explain the diagnosis and that he did commit the crime, but he was not legally sane when he committed the crimes. And many therapists had written letters confirming this diagnosis as well. And Billy did want to waive his right to a jury trial. So he was going to go in front of the judge, Judge Flowers, for rape, kidnap, and aggravated assault. So rape at the time held a maximum of 10 to 25 years per count, and he was being charged with 9 counts. So they presented his horrific abuse as a child and how he would split himself, and Judge Flowers did find Billy not guilty due to reason of insanity on all counts. So he didn't necessarily like get to go free, but he was sent to a mental hospital because he really needed treatment or he could snap and hurt someone else again. And this is usually the case with the insanity defense working, quote unquote, is that you are sent to a mental hospital. Like you're not just like free
You're getting
to go.
rehabilitated. You're not just like free of all charges.
Yeah.
So Billy was sent to the Athens Mental Health Institution. It was a low security facility. There's like no bars on the windows. Security's minimal. And they sent him there especially for Dr. David Call. So he was going to try and restore Billy to reality and able to get him like back into society. It was interesting because about half of the staff believed him and the other half did not. So in this like mental health institution, like half were just not believing what he says is his diagnosis. And another doctor at the facility said he was very difficult and like really hard to deal with. And Dr. Call was not a fully trained psychiatrist, actually. Like he had to be supervised when treating anyone. So it wasn't like he was a doctor who could just go in. Like he had to have another doctor there with him at all times. And Dr. Call would kind of like put Billy in a trance to like bring out the other personalities. And once he got to Athens, more personalities came out. And they were called the undesirables, and they'd been hidden. And so now it's revealed that he had about 24 personalities, which, again, with the whole, his lesbian woman personality being the rapist, but you have these undesirables who are like horrible, and none of them committed this. Like,
Yeah.
the math ain't mathin'. So now they're saying Billy has like 24 personalities. So now they're going to try to come up with an idea of writing a book about Billy's life. Sybil was so successful. So, of course, the next author is going to want to come in and try and make success off this. So Daniel Keyes was going to write the book. Kathy said they agreed to the book and believed once it was published, half the profits would go to Keyes and half would go to Billy. And Daniel Keyes would come to all the therapy sessions and like access like to the film from Harding Hospital. Like he had full access to basically everything. And also at this time, Dr. Call's objectivity was being questioned. Like, was he just using Billy to become famous and make money? Like, does he have a conflict of interest? Like, is he not being unbiased like in his treatment? So Dr. Call was paid $3,000 as a consultant on the book and sought the permission of the Ohio Parole Authority to seek permission to let Billy go to New York to appear on TV stations, go to Hollywood to like be in a movie. So he's saying he's like trying to help Billy, but he's also petitioning for him to go be on TV shows and be in a movie. And it's like,
yeah.
I feel like that shouldn't
fishy.
be a priority. I feel like if you're trying to help someone, you should be like, no, you're staying here to get help. And then when you're done, you can go, but you're getting help.
Agreed.
Kathy was also becoming skeptical because she thought like they're supposed to be treating and healing Billy, like not making him famous. Like we're not, wanting to make him a superstar. And the public is obviously getting very annoyed because it's like Billy's now going to get rich off his crimes. Like he raped these women and now he's going to be a star because of this diagnosis. But the doctors did believe he was improving and they were starting to allow some off-campus furloughs. So politicians came up with Milligan law, which was a bill saying any money he made from the book, movie, or his paintings would have to go to the state. Because he was selling some of his paintings for like thousands of dollars. And in one of his off-campus furloughs, he even had an art show. So politicians at this time are like, we're going to try to get Billy in a more secure facility. They don't really like him having freedoms. I can see the public being annoyed because I'm like, I get it. It's an insanity defense, but now you're making all this money, like while our tax dollars are supposed to be paying for you to get help, but you're being on TV and making all this money. Like it's muddled.
So did the Son of Sam law not apply here because he wasn't convicted of the crimes? Like that's why. Okay, so the Milligan's law changed.
I think it's
that.
around the time also like Son of Sam was being introduced because this is also the time of David Berkowitz.
I was thinking because Son of Sam was the 60s, right? Or was he the 70s?
I can't remember it because
Okay.
I don't exactly remember when that law.
Yeah.
And like we did also see like some states have different stuff. True. But yeah, I think because he was found not guilty, so he wasn't convicted of those crimes. He could be getting the money, but it's like, hold on here.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Billy did also inspire another bill that was entered that in order for a patient to receive leave or be released, they would have to go back to court to get it approved. So because he is not guilty on this insanity defense, they're like, if you're wanting to actually release him, like he needs to come back to court and like you need to prove to us that he can be released or, So Billy was also starting to cause some trouble in the Athens facility. He would bring drugs and alcohol to some of the young ladies there. He would go with them into the orchid orchards. I can't say that word for some reason. He'd drink, they would have sex, and he wasn't supposed to be doing this. And there was a lot of speculation that he had raped 2 of the patients. So they're getting very close to him behaving like as he did before. So Billy was transferred from Athens to Lima State Hospital in the middle of the night. He was moved by a court order and put in a maximum security unit. It did come out, however, that the patients at Athens said it was not a rape and nobody had been harmed, but because he is kind of starting to spiral into this behavior like before, politicians already pissed off are like, he's going to Lima. Like he's going. Yeah. So, as we said before, Lima State Hospital is not a good place. It is not a place of treatment. It is basically like the documentary said it was like a place where psychiatric patients were to be warehoused. Like, we're just going to keep you here, but no one's going to help. So he was taken off of all of his medications and re-prescribed new medications because this new doctor at Lima did not believe his multiple personality diagnosis and gave him a new diagnosis of schizophrenia with dissociative episodes. So he's not getting his therapy because, again, this is the state hospital doesn't care. He's getting a new diagnosis, new medication, all of this.
Like taking someone off of all of their medication and restarting like a new medication regimen is just so incredibly dangerous. Like, are you trying to create an episode for something to happen?
Yeah. And if you listen to our Patreon episode, plug, you'll learn that with multiple personalities / DID, medication does not help. You need therapy. Like, medications like can help for like your depressive episodes, your anxiety, to like if you're having a rough day. But like Billy didn't need medication. Like, he needed counseling. Like, the medication was just kind of a little bit of a help, but he needed the therapy. And he wasn't getting that. So Billy starts fragmenting a lot. He's having more amnesia. And eventually the state decided to close Lima State and open, they called them forensic units. So Billy at this point was now just being moved around a lot. And that's not helpful because, like, if you don't have a therapist who knows you, knows DID, knows how to help you, it gets real muddled and you're just not getting the help you really need. So in 1981, The Minds of Billy Milligan came out. Kathy does say parts of the book are very fictionalized, which is why it was not a source for today, because you would have to try and pick and choose what is true and what's not. She said Daniel Keyes believed Billy 100%, and Billy had a tendency to manipulate others and the environment, so you just can't believe him, and parts of the book are just not true. So now the reader has to go and try and figure out like what's real, what's not real. So it's not, you can read it if you want, but just know it's not the truth. All of it, at least. Billy would also engage in sexual relationships with staff, and he was notorious with young women, and he'd get a lot of love letters too, like we constantly see in these cases. And I know. He did end up getting engaged to a fellow like patient / inmate's sister, Tonda Bartley. So they got married while he's in this forensic unit. But shortly after, 51 days to be exact, she divorced him. So I guess she maybe came to her senses and was like, oh, maybe shouldn't do that. Ooh,
thank goodness.
And they got divorced. Yeah. So in 1983, Dr. Call does start to treat him again, and starts to try and help him like reintegrate into society, figure out how to help him. So Billy is starting to be able out in the world more. He even owned a house. And Billy was offered to be on a soap opera as himself.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, this whole like getting famous because of who he is.
Yeah.
So the sheriff of Athens, Bob Allen, was very unhappy with Billy being out. And he's trying really hard with anything he can to get him behind bars again. And their properties, like where Billy owned his house, actually touched with the sheriff. So if you already hate somebody, it's not Hatfields and McCoys here. It's not going to go great. So Billy did accuse Bob Allen's sons of shooting at his dogs. And then there was this like barn incident. So Billy had gone out riding with a hospital employee and they shot at the employee's supervisor's barn. So I don't really know why. Okay. The sheriff's after you and you decide to do this. They did get caught, and this did mean Billy's going to be put on stricter supervision, obviously, but he claims he had nothing to do with the shooting. And Billy also did start rumors that 2 inmates had been paid by Sheriff Allen to kill Billy and make it look like a suicide, but a lot of people think Billy just kind of made this up to like go against him. So in 1985, Billy was going to go to trial for perjury, vandalism, and intimidation of a witness. However, these charges did never go to trial. They were dismissed because Sheriff Allen had recorded a conversation, and that was illegal in the state. So the judge had to dismiss the charges. So Sheriff Allen just screwed himself. So Billy was then moved to the Columbus area to the Timothy Moritz Center. And the treating physician there was the same one from Lima who didn't believe his multiple personality diagnosis. And so now Billy's been in the psychiatric system for 5 to 6 years, and he's just not getting like steady treatment that he needs. He's becoming depressed and disassociated. And Billy just like felt like his life was in danger because he was back with this doctor who doesn't believe him. So Billy walks away from the hospital on the 4th of July weekend in 1986. So they began trying to search for him, and they were concerned because they're like, without medication, without therapy, like he's going to become dangerous again. And his escape was reported to the State Highway Patrol, and local officers were searching as well. And it got a lot of media attention. Like you'll see this, like Billy just constantly just makes media attention throughout his life.
Yeah.
And a lot of those close to him believed he was just like leaving for the weekend and like would go back in a few days because they're like, he just thinks he's in danger because this doctor's back, but he'll come back. And Billy actually made a video explaining how he felt his treatment was being politicized and they didn't care if he was being treated. They just wanted him to be institutionalized forever, which I can't say I disagree. And Billy like agreed to come back, like if they agreed to some of his conditions. So Billy went to Colorado with a friend, Jim Murray, and he went to Aspen. And like Jim left the car and then flew back to Ohio. So Billy has a car now. He's in like Colorado, and Billy eventually left the car at the airport. And now the FBI was involved once it was found because now he's going across state borders. And Billy was considered very dangerous. So they also found out his brother, Jim, lived in British Columbia. So now they're like, great, he's going to flee the entire country at this point. So Billy told his brother that he was painting on the street and making good money. And then he flew to Seattle to meet his brother. So he decided to stay in Bellingham, which is like a little city on the US-Canada border. And he rented a house and was going by the name Christopher Carr. So his friend Jim Murray, who'd driven him to Colorado, had given him a social security number for Christopher Carr. And Billy was able to use it to get a license and like start living as like a different person. It gets a little confusing because we had two Jims. So if you hear Jim brother, that's why. Eventually his brother brought him to Canada, but no one had ever contacted his brother to ask about Billy or if he was with him. So they knew Jim lived in Canada. They're concerned about him fleeing the country. Nobody talks to Jim.
That seems neglectful.
Yeah. So Jim, the brother, had called the public defender, like Billy's lawyer, and the public defender are like, people in Ohio are really, really mad. And honestly, it would just save a lot of trouble if Billy just like died by suicide. Like it would just, if he got in the woods and just died, like that'd make things a lot easier. It's like, what are you saying? So Jim, his brother, was now in regular contact with Jim Murray. And Jim, the brother, was noticing that Billy was starting to do some real like disturbing paintings, like some like death, some dark paintings. And he's like, I think Billy is needing help again.
So Billy was then starting to get nervous because a man had gone missing from his neighborhood, and he was scared that police would start asking around and that he would be found. Because they're like, oh, this area is like getting some attention, like they're going to find me. So he did move into another house and started a hot tub company with two other guys. So Jim Murray would start having conference calls with Dr. Call, and he recommended a doctor named Ralph Allison in California. So his brother Jim takes Billy to see Dr. Allison, but the address actually led to a prison, and Billy refused to go in and then ended up going to Florida. So Billy said that he was calling his Aunt Jo. He was also at a hotel's conference room where a law enforcement convention was going on. And Jim's like, are you trying to get caught? Like, that doesn't make any
sense. What are you doing? Like, get away from there.
So his brother Jim ended up calling the FBI and saying how Billy was in Florida. So agents went to the hotel and they saw Billy and they arrested him again. So again, Billy is back in the news like always. So the man who went missing from Billy's neighborhood was Michael Madden. So Michael Pierce Madden went missing from Bellingham in September of 1986. He was in his early 30s, and his father reported that he hadn't seen him in a while, and he reported him missing to the Bellingham Police Department on September 27th. So they talked to people at the apartments, including some friends and neighbors, and a man who identified himself as Christopher Carr. So they talked to the landlord, and she said that she had last seen him on September 15th, that she had come to collect rent, and Christopher and Michael had been arguing, and Christopher got mad and went into his apartment, and this is the last time that anyone reported seeing Michael Madden. So investigators interviewed Christopher Carr, and he did become the center of the investigation. So Mike Madden had received disability checks from the armed forces, and they discovered that they had been forged and put into a joint account that Christopher had opened up with Mike. So Mike Madden came back from vacation on the 14th, and they were seen arguing on the 15th, and it was likely over this money situation because Mike realized that like his checks were missing, and this is likely what made Christopher want to get rid of Mike. So on September 18th, Christopher cashed Mike's September government check. So many believe that this sounded just like Billy, trying to hook up with someone that he could like manipulate. And after cashing the check, he sold Mike's car. So Christopher Carr was known for being a liar and would lie about where he was working and like what he did. And investigators soon discovered that Christopher Carr was Billy Milligan. No, you did not see that coming at all.
You didn't see it coming at all when I told you earlier Billy Milligan was going under the name Christopher Carr.
You just thought it was the other Christopher Carr, you know? So investigators found lenses and frames that had blood on them, and DNA wasn't really like a thing at this point, so they didn't have that, and they also didn't have enough blood to determine like if the person was dead. So they did believe that Mike was dead and that Billy was involved, but they didn't have any evidence to go off of. There was no body, no evidence of a crime being committed, like a really good circumstantial case, but not really enough to go off of at this point.
And especially like you aren't going into Mike's apartment and there's like so much blood he's clearly missing. You know what I mean? Like he could have, or like dead, I meant. Like he could have just like ran away somewhere and that's all they know. So it's like, well, what can we do? Like we don't have enough.
Yeah. So Kathy's like, I hope he didn't do it, but I can't positively say that he didn't. So she knows who her brother is.
He's possible, yeah.
Yeah. And his brother Jim and Jim Murray both said that they think it's very possible that he did it. So without enough evidence to charge him, he was sent back to Ohio, to the Timothy Moritz Forensic Center. So once Billy was put back under the care of the doctor, Dr. Linder from Lima, he just gave up. Like he said that he's like, I have nothing else to live for. He went on a hunger strike that he did finally end on day 34 because he was so close to death. So the hospital brought in another doctor, Dr. Sheila Porter. So she had him petition to be released from the center to receive outpatient treatment. So the judge wanted an outside expert and an outside evaluation, and he was taken to Boston to see Dr. James Chu in a special unit. So Dr. Chu said that he felt like manipulative and when he was trying to like convince him that he was fused, but he did say that he should be released. So at first, the Department of Corrections gave him a 90-day contract job with computer programming to help him with the transition.
Which a lot of people were also very mad about this because they're like, this guy got off on the insanity defense and now you're releasing him and giving him a job that gives him access to a computer with all of our information. Like, what are you doing?
This doesn't make much sense. Yeah. So in March of 1990, Tracy, Billy's girlfriend, said that she was having trouble with Billy and he had threatened to kill her. So Tracy called Billy's brother-in-law, Rob, and asked him to stay. So Billy called in the middle of the night and said, like, I know Rob is there. He's like, you know, I can come and kill you all and nothing will happen because I'm mentally ill, which is like a huge indicator of like, you acknowledge everything that's going on here.
Yeah.
He also told Tracy the cops were stupid and didn't realize when he was arrested in Florida that he had Mike Madden's glasses on him and there was blood on them. What?
Like,
yeah. Then he told Tracy that he killed a black man in Logan, Ohio. So the person he's referring to is Dwuan Cox. So Dwuan Cox went missing in 1979 and they found his car abandoned in the Logan area. And Billy had told his sister that he knew Dwuan and they mostly smoked pot together. And around this time, Billy rode up on a motorcycle claiming he had bought it and gave Kathy a substantial amount of money. So interesting. And Dwuan Cox has never been found. Then around this time, they were talking about making a movie. So Billy had been in contact with James Cameron and Leonardo DiCaprio was set to play Billy. James Cameron had even come out to Ohio to look at the areas where the crimes had happened. And Billy Milligan was flown out to LA by the studios, which what is wrong with you all? That this is something that
I was so sad. I love James Cameron. Titanic is like my favorite movie of all time. And I'm like, oh, like, baby really, James, what are you doing?
And it's like, okay, if you want to make a movie about it, like that's one thing. But like speaking to the guy that did it and like treating him like this celebrity is just disgusting.
Yeah.
Billy was able to live this super lavish lifestyle in LA. He was put up in hotels and he had these nights out with drugs and alcohol. However, James Cameron found out that a woman named Sandra Arcara actually owned the rights to Billy Milligan's life story. So Billy had previously offered up the rights to many people, countless people that he has given the rights to his life story. So, okay. So Sandra sued James Cameron for $1.5 million. James Cameron did take it to Fox, but Fox said no, and the project just collapsed. So, like, we don't want anything to do with this guy. Are you kidding me?
They're like, this is already going to be super dicey. We're not going to pay this woman $1.5 million in addition to whatever budget you're wanting for this movie.
No thanks. So he was receiving royalties from the book sales overseas, about $3 million. So the state was going after it. And the state of Ohio was now billing Billy for all of the days he had spent in the mental health facilities. Like, you were getting like room and board and food and mental health treatment, and you have $3 million, you're going to pay us back for this.
Yeah.
And Billy's old lawyer also sued Billy for $100,000. So Billy did declare bankruptcy. So now the bankruptcy court would receive the money and start paying Ohio and the other debtors. So now Billy moves to Las Vegas, and he was doing well gambling, but he did start having episodes of mental decline. He started saying that he would sue people or kill them or have them killed. And he was eventually arrested just for a bunch of misdemeanors. And he eventually did want to go back to Ohio. So Kathy bought him a mobile home out in her field where he could paint and just live a quiet life. She's like, just stay here and stay put. Just go relax.
Just you don't sit in these woods.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like she really was trying to like help him. Like, she knew that he was sick and she knew that he has done a lot of bad things, and she was just trying to like keep him out of trouble.
She was interviewed a lot in the 4-episode documentary, and she just broke my heart because it was like she knew who her brother was, and she knew he wasn't perfect, but it was her brother and she loved him, and she was trying to help, but she also knows, and like she mentioned too, like, I don't want the victims to hear this and think I'm excusing him. Like, I don't want any of that. It's just like, what do you do? Like, what do you do?
Definitely. So Billy was diagnosed with cancer in 2012. He was drinking really heavily and just like not caring for himself. And towards the end of his life, he wondered if God would forgive him. And he's like, I'm a terrible person. I've killed people. Like, he's acknowledging all of the things that he's done. And on December 12th, 2014, Billy did die of cancer in Columbus, Ohio. So some people don't believe the multiple personalities diagnosis. Some people believe it was like more hysterical neurosis, which like with like features of antisocial personality disorder. They're like, something was going on here, but I don't think that he actually had these like multiple personalities, is what some people think. And like we said, the victims were just completely forgotten in all of this. Like, all of the press, everything is about Billy Milligan and his 24 personalities. Like, no one is talking about the women that he raped. Who knows how many murders, at least the murders of Michael Madden and Dwayne Cox, and who knows who else. Like, all of these people were just forgotten in the midst of Billy Milligan's story and all of his multiple personalities. And were they true? Were they not? Who knows?
That's the thing. I don't know. I believe Billy Milligan is severely mentally unwell. Like, I do think he has some mental health disorder. I mean, look at his childhood. He was basically tortured. Do I necessarily know if it's multiple personality disorder? Do I know? I don't know how easy it is. I've never tried to have multiple personality. Like, I've never tried to fake it, like, because people are like, it's fake. It's so hard to know, like, what it did seem when they were treating him for the multiple personality disorder, he was improving versus like the doctors who were just trying to heavily medicate him. I don't know. I'm not here to say he had it or he didn't. He is the only person to ever have been found not guilty by reason of insanity for multiple personality disorder. So he's the only one who's ever been, found not guilty based off of that diagnosis. So I don't know. It's tough. It's such a hard disorder. And like, doing the research for the Patreon episode, I'm like, oh, I don't know. This is so hard. It's so convoluted and difficult and hard to know.
And it's, I mean, I haven't dived as deep into it as you have yet, but I feel like it's hard to diagnose something like that because it's not something where it's like so easy to like oh, you check all the boxes. And again, it's something that it's like, whether you're faking it or not,
Yeah. And I
how
mean,
can
it
you
does
tell?
completely make sense that if you're having such a bad reality that you would almost create these identities
Yeah.
to protect yourself,
Mhm.
make a different reality. But it's just like, it's so difficult. Like, it's
Yeah.
so, like, I don't want to say I don't believe it, because like I do believe that like it can be a thing. This did lead to the fact we were talking about a girl on TikTok who would like take videos of herself saying like I'm transitioning and stuff. And
Mhm.
I don't know about that. I'm not going to comment really on that. I'm not her
Yeah.
doctor. I'm not her. But it is like such a difficult one where it's like, is it? Isn't it? Like, I don't.
And it's like, if
It's
they are saying
difficult.
that's their reality, like, how do you prove it's not? Like, we know that
Yeah.
like these people do not exist as like outside entities, but how can you prove that a personality in your head doesn't exist?
And there were things too, like within the research, like especially with Daniel Keyes, where it would be like, oh, well, Reagan, who had the Yugoslavian accent, like he could speak the language and he knew all this information that only someone from Yugoslavia would know, like claiming that like he was his own identity and it wasn't Billy making it up. But whenever they did have someone come in to speak to him in that language,
Mhm.
it was mush. Like none of it was true.
Mm.
So that is a hard thing of like, well, is he just like making it up? Is he just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And like, I don't want to say he is or isn't. Like, I'm not trying to diminish
Mhm.
people with mental health issues. I
Yeah,
believe he's severely mentally unwell. Like, I think he needs
absolutely.
help. I think, honestly, like, it was better that he didn't just go to prison, because he would have gotten out not that long, because
True.
it,
Yeah.
and he would have just been worse when he got out,
Mhm.
like, as we've
Because he
seen with the
wasn't getting
robbery
any
charge.
treatment. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Yeah,
guys, it's a
it's
difficult one, and I can't wait for you guys to tell us what you think,
please do. Yes.
because we don't know what we think.
Yeah. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Before my computer dies, because it is at 10% battery, but I really don't want to go grab the charger for these last like 4 minutes. So we're gonna hang on. You can do it, computer. I believe in you. Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is, it is officially football time. I know you're going to hear this and it's going to be like week 3 already, week 4. We're recording ahead because we have busy lives.
Yes.
But it's officially football time, and I can't wait to go eat
Yes.
some pizza, and I'm going to watch some football, and I'm so excited because it's always just such a fun time to do, and just Kevin and I kind of have our little traditions, and it's just so
Mm-hmm.
fun. Such a fun time. Fall's coming around. Halloween. It's basically Halloween. I'm just so pumped for just the fall in general. I'm just so
Mm-hmm.
excited for this whole season. It's such a fun season with holidays coming up and themes, and I don't know.
Yes.
I love it all. So that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
That is also my perk of the week, that today is the first NFL Sunday. So we are, like you said, getting ready for all of our traditions. Andrew has been grilling burgers this whole time. I can smell them. They smell delicious. Going to finish this up and go watch some football. Hopefully have some champagne if the Bengals win. If they don't, we will not have champagne and Andrew will be very sad. Get Millie all dressed up in her Bengals gear and all ready to go. And hopefully she does not distract us from the game too much, because last year she was easy to just plunk down in something and
Yeah,
so
this year is gonna be different.
yeah, she's on the move this year. So but she loves watching it. She calls it kick a ball, so she is always
So
wanting to
maybe
watch her
she'll
kick a
be like
ball.
real captivated into it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Apparently Eli gets very distressed watching football, because when they fall and then they show the recap
Oh
of it,
no.
he'll be like, "Are they hurt? Are they hurt?" And like, we went
Poor
to the
guy.
UT game, and my sister texted me saying how, "Oh no, like I hope Aunt Courtney doesn't fall, or Mimi, or Grandpa," and then said, "And Kevin doesn't do that anymore." So I guess Kevin used to fall a lot and doesn't anymore, but it was very funny. But he was very concerned because the football players were falling, that we were
Mm,
going to fall. Like,
poor
it was
guy.
hot for him to
Yeah,
figure out the difference. But
but Kevin
poor
doesn't
little
fall
sweet
anymore, so
soul.
he's good.
Poor little sweet soul is so anxious. But yeah, so if you want to tell us about your team, your thoughts on this case, just anything in general, you can do so on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at Caff Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod, Facebook and YouTube at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, TikTok at Caffeinated Crimes. As I've plugged it like 7 million times during this episode, in 2 days, you will get a full deep dive on dissociative identity disorder. And even after this research, I still cannot spell dissociative. Anytime I spell it wrong every time. Too many
It's a
S's
hard
and
one.
vowels. I
Yeah.
can't get it right. But yeah, you can do so. And you do Discord, video episodes, a whole slew of great things over there at patreon.com/caffeinated crimes.
And as always, we would greatly appreciate any reviews you want to leave us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on any other devices that platforms. Sorry, my computer just came up and said my device is about to go. So anyway, yeah, so all those things, leave us the reviews and tell us we're wonderful. We appreciate it.
And go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.